Go up to your paper and maybe tell us a little bit about what you're thinking about.
Okay. So, what I thought a lot about is Portia's role, and specifically how she's viewed as a woman looking for a husband, and the assumptions that are put on her, living in a very patriarchal society, that she is, the patriarch of her family was just lost, so now the decision that has to happen before all others is for her to find another patriarch. So I talk a lot about the assumptions that are put on her as a woman who is unaccompanied by a man, and what follows those assumptions. So like when Bassanio when Bassanio hears about Portia, and everyone, not only Bassanio, but when people learn the news of her father's death, the immediate action is to go to her door and gain the opportunity to pick one of the chests and open it up and potentially marry her. Um, and I talk a lot about the process of the process that her father laid out for her to find a husband before he died. And how Portia has these conversations with Nerissa about the significance of their suitors and how she thinks of them as a person, but because of her situation, her opinion doesn't hold any validity when it comes to finding the suitor.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what maybe that much is, and then from here down, I talk about Shylock.
So you mean the challenge, the challenge part? So the first part is, what did you connect all this with?
I connected it with how women are viewed in Shakespeare's time, and how Shakespeare, how he writes women into his plays. He makes his Shakespeare had, Shakespeare allows us to talk about it a lot because he wrote his women as these very strong and cognitive and just thoughtful women who don't fall complacently into the patriarchy.
Did you see that in Love's Labour's Lost or Twelfth Night?
Yes.
And who specifically, you remember?
You see it a lot in Olivia in Twelfth Night, and you see it a lot in Viola, who, when her brother dies, decides to dress up as a man, and try to exist not as a woman but as a man.
Right.
And that you see how because we know that Cesario is actually Viola, we are able to kind of get the contrast between how people are treating her as Cesario versus how they would potentially as Viola.
Yep, very good, very good. It's good stuff. Good.
So I kind of connected the whole play with the central idea that we're focusing on, empathy.
Yep.
And so I think Shakespeare immediately sets up the discussion right at the beginning for empathy with in sooth I know not why I am so sad, and then everyone's subsequent reaction to that. And then the motifs that we're discussing are clearly sort of connected to that idea. So I specified with racial tensions in this play.
Yep.
And just some examples like Miss Not Me Like for My Complexion, I hate him for he's a Christian. So there's a lot of racial tension in here.
Yeah.
And so that's caused me personally to sort of self-examine my own biases and prejudices and how they're addressing my choice and decisions.
Yeah.
And so
Is that what you that's how it extends or broadens your ideas about what you connected it with?
Yeah.
Oh, very good.
And so I'm ready for this tie-in right here. And so I think that sort of that self-examination is like the closest that we can get to empathy.
Oh.
I don't think we can really like truly 100% empathize like Claire's been saying like throughout this whole entire lesson. And so I think that sort of self-examination and the self-assessment is sort of the the closest thing we can really get to empathy.
Hmm.
And then so I talked about how I frequently actually don't think before speaking and acting. And so reading this play, can reading this play help me to slow down so that I'm not out of line or don't offend anyone and that sort of stuff. And then another thing that I just thought about is am I or are we as a culture too focused on materialism?
Uh-huh.
And that sort of ties in with the whole commerce idea. So that's
Interesting. It's good.
what I was talking about.
It's good. We're going to keep that up. We're going to keep all these up, actually, because we can continue to connect to this. Very good. Thank you. Claire, your writing is very precise and small.
Okay, so I focused on the parallel between those who identified in the Jewish culture and the women,
Yes.
because both groups are actively oppressed under the white man's rule. I wanted to look at the pre-existing stereotypes, like the woodcut that we looked at,
Mm-hmm.
and the idea of passing a woman on from one man to another.
Mm-hmm.
So on one hand, we have the women who are expected to follow the father's wishes and is expected to be passed onto the next male dominant hand,
Yeah.
and that in its own is a form of dehumanization.
Yeah.
Likewise, the Jewish people are not people. They're not considered people. They're understood as quote unquote devils, and especially from the wood cutting that we saw and from the passage with the clown, we can see that there wasn't really an understanding that seeing those with Jewish heritage as devils were wrong. It was just merely accepted as a part of their society. So in both groups, neither of those sects of people are considered people by themselves. They're only considered less than the standard of humanity. And so that sort of ties into our empathy thing, because no one will be able to understand their situation because they are not seen on the same level field of one who identifies as human.
Yeah.
And so then that just reminded me of Twelfth Night, the fact that Cesario gained respect, but even when Viola was on shore with the captain, she was not displayed as, yes, she was a strong female character, you could say, but she never appeared in her own. She was always appearing with a man or for a man. It was never just her alone. So then, extending my ideas, I think it's interesting how a lot of the issues that we tend to discover in that Shakespeare tends to make us think about are often the same issues that we have today.
Uh-huh.
And that begs me to wonder why, is the reason art is so important? Yes, because it gives us meaning, but also because we find meaning through trying to better the world around us, as if we have some sort of designated, we must justify our existence by making the world a better place before we leave. And then my last question would be, what can we do? What can we do? We can look at art and detect all these issues and try and make sense of them, but at the end of the day, what can we actively do to make a change?
Yeah, that's the question, right? Right. Thank you.
I thought, one thing that really resonated with me, or because I read it, I was reading that part, was Shylock's speech, and I thought, we've read a bunch of stuff with Shakespeare, and how he uses antithesis and thesis, I guess, like
Mhm.
to kind of explain stuff. So he's like, okay, like everybody kind of thinks like, oh, a Christian person bleeds, but does like a Jewish person bleed when you
Yeah.
cut them? Which is like kind of saying like we're both people, and that kind of pertains to the sight invisibility aspect of kind of like the motifs that we're looking at in the play. And then that kind of got me into the passage with the Prince of Morocco, This Like Me Not for My Complexion. Like both Shylock and the Prince of Morocco are dealing with that like appearance versus like who they like, what people see and like who they actually are.
Mhm.
Which like they like one question that I like have is sometimes what you see is also what people are, but like I think we're focusing on like what you see is not what people are. Like, do you get that? Because it's like we like look so much at like don't judge a book by its cover, but like something that somebody is definitely has an impact on like who they are. But you can't let that be the only thing you see, because you can't just totally ignore that like they're Jewish, like, or that they're Christian, or that the Prince of Morocco is black. But he's saying, mislike me not for my complexion. Like you can make inferences, but like don't let that impair you from like seeing who I am alongside like my race or alongside my beliefs.
The other day when Archer came, his OT said, "Don't think of him as the disabled,
Yeah.
but Archer with a disability." Right? That shift is critical, right?
Yeah, and, like,
You're not defined.
Response was interesting.
yeah.
Yeah, it was. It sure was.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, because like it's obvious, like with Archer, it's obvious that he's disabled. But like that's something that, like that's just like a characteristic of him. Like
Yes.
that's something that's obvious, like just as obvious as like
That's right.
a black person's black.
Exactly.
But you can't
Exactly.
let that stop you. If they're like, if you see a Jewish person and you're like, oh, like they must love money or something. like,
Right.
That's where it crosses the line from like impairing you from seeing who they actually are.
Yes.
Kind of thing.
Very good. Very nicely said.
It's
Yeah.
awesome.
We're almost at the end. Do you wanna hit us with one last puzzle
Yeah. Okay. And then
or expand? I mean, we do have 2 minutes, so
okay. And
Yeah.
then I was like thinking about Twelfth Night, and then I was thinking about Macbeth because freshman year is like what's foul is fair and fair is foul.
yeah.
Kind of thing, like again with like the appearances and stuff.
Yes.
And then Twelfth Night with the like general appearances like Cesario and Viola.
Hmm.
And then like I was just thinking, why? Like I'm so confused with like why there's like this random like puzzle for Portia's spouse. Like it's just weird to me. And like if the father, he obviously wants control over the situation, or else he'd just be like, okay, Portia, like just choose your spouse, whatever.
Hmm.
But he obviously wants power over it. But then he's like leaving it up to chance, which is kind of weird.
It
But not
is.
like not chance, but like a weird game, which is like
Yeah.
weird. But
Yeah, I hope we talk about that because
yeah, because it's
Uh,
like if you want power over, it, then just choose choose a spouse.
exactly.
But it's I don't know.
Yeah,
And
I don't
then-
know.
And then the like expanded thing is like with 12th Night we dealt with like gender and sexuality kind of, and then now this is kind of like race with Morocco and then religious beliefs.
Yeah. Hmm.
And then it's kind of like a different kind of subcategory of empathy of people who are judged by their appearance or their beliefs. So it's like empathy and then like race, gender, like kind of
Mhm,
stuff. And then I was thinking about this, and I was thinking, can Shylock and Antonio truly like empathize with each other, or can people like that have these prejudices originally see past their biases and actually empathize? Like, and like it sounds like easy, like oh, just don't be biased, but and that's kind of like what Shakespeare's going to explore, like how that happens or if it can happen.
Yeah, it's wonderful. This is ISA